Hi, welcome to Nightbird Tarot's Learning the Tarot: A Beginner's Journey. My name is Brooke. This is lesson 1, week 1 of your basic introduction to the tarot and also reading the tarot as well. For this beginner's lesson, it is very important that you must possess a pack of tarot cards. It is an interactive lesson. Plus, you'll have homework at the end of each lesson each week. So run out if you haven't already. Buy a pack of tarot cards. The best deck to get is probably primarily the most widely used, which is the AE Weight deck or the Universal Rider-Waite deck. That can be found at Books A Million, Amazon, other bookstores, and it's easy to find. I'm using for this lesson the Robin Wood Tarot deck, which is a very good deck as well. The design's very simplistic, and it's basically the same as the Rider-Waite deck, just different images. Take the cards out of the deck right now for the lesson. Once they're out of the box, keep them out of the box. You want to find something that is very special for you to wrap your cards in. They say to wrap your tarot cards in 100% silk or something that's not synthetic material. That doesn't have to necessarily be the case. I do have some tarot decks wrapped in silk scarves, but silk is very expensive. This is something that I use for the Robin Wood Tarot deck, and it's probably made out of rayon, I don't know, but it's pretty, something that's aesthetically pleasing that you want to put your cards in because you're going to start to form a relationship with them. And once they're in the cloth and out of the box, you can toss the box aside or keep it or put it into another place. Many decks come with a pamphlet included in the tarot box. Keep that for reference, which is very important. And also make sure that you keep your cards in a dry, damp-free place. Maybe perhaps keep them under your pillow at night because you're going to develop a relationship with your cards, or keep them away from where they will be getting damp or wet or things spilled on them. If you have small children, keep them away from little hands, which is very important because you are primarily the one that is going to be touching these cards for the next 4 weeks. You're going to develop a relationship with your cards. Now, the mechanics of the tarot, I'm not going to go into a historical lesson about the tarot. That information is very easy to find online. I'm not going to describe the origins of the tarot. This is a basic beginner's lesson. Now, I do not read the cards reversed, so you won't be learning about that. There's many lessons available online. I believe on YouTube you could probably find out how to read the cards reversed. If you have any books about the tarot, they can also assist you in reading the cards reversed. I don't read the cards reversed. So you're only going to be learning about the basics of interpreting the cards upright in this lesson. Now, the mechanics of your cards, there's 78 cards in total. 78 cards can seem overwhelming for the first time beginner. It is a lot of cards, but each card has great significance in its meaning. The mechanics of the tarot with 78 cards, there's 22 major arcana cards. The 22 major arcana cards are what many tarot scholars or tarot enthusiasts refer to as the trump cards. They can signify major events or major life events. The first 22, I want you to pull out of the deck. We're going to be working with them this week and possibly next week before we get into the other 56 cards. The 22 major arcana cards, or the trump cards. If you pull your tarot cards out of the deck, You begin with number 0, which is the Fool. Start with number 0. The Fool is the first card in the tarot deck. Then you have number 1, which is the Magician. Okay, but however, you start with the number 0 in terms of counting your tarot cards, and it should go all the way up to 21, which is the World. There's not a 22nd card, so don't get confused. So the Fool represents the number 0, which in terms of the whole Major Arcana group, it will end with the World 21, which is essentially 22 cards. Take the 22 cards out of the deck. If you're working with a tarot deck where the cards are all mixed up, it'll only take you a few minutes to pull them out and separate them. You can pause the lesson and do that and then get back started to where we're going to go to from next. But it's very important to pull out the 22 Major Arcana cards. Leave the other 56 cards aside. We're going to be working with these individually for the homework this week and also speaking about their significance and their interpretation. So that's very important. The 22 Major Arcana cards, or the Trump cards. There are 4 suits in the Minor Arcana cards. We'll speak about those later. The Major Arcana cards have great significance when it comes to their meaning because they're attached to life events. They have great significance in interpretations when you're doing a tarot spread. They have great interpretations in terms of major life events or something of a great significance or level. So the 22 Major Arcana cards, keep those aside. Now, within the tarot deck itself, you will find that when you see in readings not very Major Arcana cards that pop up, that does not mean that the reading does not have significance. So I don't want you to get confused. So if you're watching readings on YouTube and you see many Major Arcana cards or you don't see any at all, or if you've ever had tarot readings done or if you've done tarot readings yourself, that does not mean that there's not great significance in a reading if you don't see Major Arcana cards. But the Major Arcana cards are kind of like the big guns in the reading, and then the Minor Arcana cards add flavor to the Major Arcana cards, or add characteristics, or add elements, because the Minor Arcana, there are 4 suits in the Minor Arcana, there are court cards in the Minor Arcana, there are also aces in the Minor Arcana, which we're going to get to eventually, which is very exciting because they all tie together. Now, when it comes to tarot cards, what is the difference between divination and fortune telling? Many people have asked me that question. They often think what I do in reading the tarot cards is fortune telling. I think fortune telling is very much, when you say that word, it's very much attributed to gypsies in a wagon somewhere, wearing their do-rags on their heads with the great big gold hoop earrings, and kind of being like this traveling band of nomads, stopping in towns and reading the fortunes for people. Fortune telling has an old-fashioned, almost mystical kind of connotation to it, but it's also very outdated, fortune telling. Divination, however, divination is what you will be learning about. Any sort of tool used to divine or subscribe to foretelling the future is divination, whether it's through the use of the tarot cards or runes or oracle decks or pendulums or anything that you use as for predicting or portending, not pretending, portending the future or events is known as divination. And that's what we're going to call it. This is not fortune telling, this is divination. And do you have to be psychic to be a tarot reader or to do divination? No. Psychic is a word that grabs people's attention. I don't market myself as a psychic, many people do, because I think that anybody is capable of developing their intuition or their psychic abilities. Do you have to be intuitive or psychic to do the tarot cards before learning or doing the tarot cards? No. You will develop your intuition through doing the tarot cards. You will develop a relationship with your cards if you're serious about learning about them, using them, and you will develop your intuition will come out. It will be discovered, and you'll start to find trust in your intuition and using your intuition as a guide. Okay, so you guide the tool, or does the tool guide you? So does the tarot guide you, or do you guide the tarot? Essentially, you are the interpreter of what the tarot is saying. I think you very much do guide the tool itself. Sometimes the cards really speak to you, and it may feel as if the tool is guiding you. But all in all, you are developing intuition. You're developing a relationship with your cards, which is very important. So the first step in developing a relationship with your cards is to take them out of the box and is to wrap them in your cloth or whatever you want to use, maybe perhaps a nice wooden box that someone is giving you that has special meaning to you. You want to treat them with respect and treat them with kindness, because you're going to start to form a relationship with them, which is very important. So we're going to go into the second part of this lesson where we're going to discuss more about the major arcana cards. Okay, now we're in part 2 of lesson 1, and with your 22 major arcana cards pulled out of the deck, we're going to focus on the symbolism and the rich imagery associated with the major arcana cards. The tarot is very much depicted strongly with symbolism. You can memorize the interpretation of each card, but unless you don't look at the card itself, find the imagery within each card and meld your intuition with what you see, then the interpretation alone will not have much meaning. So it's very important for us this week to learn about the symbolism and the imagery associated with especially the major arcana cards. With your 22 major arcana cards, or the trump cards, put them in your hand, and we're going to go through each one of them today. For your homework lesson for this week, I'll tell you about that later. You're only going to be working with the 22 major arcana cards. Now, as I stated, each major arcana card has great significance with life events, or the symbolism or characteristics of universal laws or universal life events, beginning with the first card, which is the number 0. Look at your card. It's the Fool. The beginning card of the major arcana deck, the 22 cards, is the Fool, number 0. Numerology in tarot is very important as well. That's very essential. We'll get to that later into the lessons. But numerology, as well as astrological attributes, are very much important in reading and interpreting the tarot as well. But essentially, beginning with the first card, look at your card, whatever deck that you're using, and this is the Fool. It's the number 0. Most typically with the Fool, whatever decks that you are using, the imagery is pretty much the same. The Fool represents the beginning of your journey. It's a journey card. It's a card of taking a risk. The number 0, in terms of absolute possibilities, the beginning stages before you realize or know what lays ahead of taking that risk, lies within it in the number 0, as well as the imagery of the card itself. You see a young fellow dancing merrily along his path, which, look at your card, he's on rocky ground. He has a dog with him. The dog's very important in symbolism as well. The dog is accompanying the Fool more as a guide as well as a bystander. Okay, there's many rich images and symbolism attached with the Fool. The Fool itself, within interpretation of a reading, can have many different meanings depending on where the card is positioned in a reading. But essentially, this is where everyone is who's watching the lesson for today. Symbolically represented, you are the Fool. You're beginning something new. You're taking a journey. You're taking a risk into the unknown. You're basically learning something that you've never learned about. And you're ready to take a journey and take an adventure into something perhaps where you may not know where it leads you. Okay? And that's very exciting. But it's also very scary at the same time, because it is unknown terrain that he's walking on. And there are no guarantees how his journey will play out. That's the imagery and the symbolism of the Fool. Reading the cards and reading the interpretations of their meaning and their attributes cannot be marginalized just by text and just by what you read. You have to look at the card, study the card, find its symbolism within the card, not just by reading what the interpretation is on a page. It's very important for you to develop an awareness of what the card is depicting to you, first and foremost, and your interpretation from that card. So the Fool, if I was going to find this in a reading, perhaps if someone was asking me what's to come about with me changing jobs, if this card came up in the reading, especially in a future potential outcome, I would interpret it as there's great possibilities for you to take a risk, or a risk is needed to take right now in your life, if that is what you're willing to do. However, there are no guarantees about how it may play out. There are no guarantees with the Fool. It's a risk-taking card. That's the interpretation of it. It's ultimate new beginnings as well. The Fool in particular doesn't mean that someone is being foolish or someone is playing the Fool. The Fool is more relevant in terms of being adventurous, going after something, going into the unknown, taking a risk, ultimate possibilities. The Fool is very much associated with its number. Number 0 is very closely linked together. So the numerology of the card is very much linked to the imagery and the interpretation of the card. So just keep that in mind. Okay, now going forward from the first card of the Major Arcana deck, I want you to go through each card. The next one is the Magician, followed by the High Priestess, the Empress, the Magician, and so forth. Go through the whole Major Arcana group. These cards are very rich with symbolism and meaning. And it might be a good idea also, as you're going through each trump card, to write down its number, the name of the card, for instance, number 1, Magician, and what you see in the card without looking at an interpretation from a book or description from a book. What do you see yourself from its imagery and from its symbolism? So for instance, with the Robin Wood Tarot deck, the Magician is very much associated and linked with magic. The Magician is really literally what it means. Beginning something, having the tools and the resources to generate something from your mental abilities, from your soul searching, from your goal seeking abilities of creating what you essentially want in your life. It's a good goal setting card, but it really has symbolism relatable to magic. Okay? The Magician is a very magical card. And with the Robin Wood Tarot deck, it's very relatable to alchemy in the imagery of this card. It's very relatable to earth energies, earth magic. He's wearing a deer hat on his head with antlers, which can be very much tied to naturalistic religions such as Wicca. You see on his altar, he has 2 swords crossed, he has a chalice, and he also has a disc or a pentacle. Holding in his hand, you see the symbolism of the infinity symbol, which looks like the number 8, hovering over his hand. And on either side of him are candles. One is black and one is white, representing the yin and the yang energy, or the positive and the negative. And it's very much accustomed to bringing forth what you want into your life and being the magician in your life. Depending on what deck you're using, the imagery may look a little bit different, obviously. So connect with that imagery. What do you see? What is your interpretation of the card itself? Spend a few minutes looking at the card. You will start to notice little details that you didn't see before. So now you're generating a connection with the card and its imagery and its symbolism, not necessarily looking at a written interpretation of it. I want you to try to develop your connection and your intuition in terms of the imagery and the symbolism of each Major Arcana card. 22 cards in total. This not only enables you to develop your intuition and skills in interpreting the card, rather than relying on text at first in learning the meaning and the symbolism of each card. because it'll become part of you. It'll be imprinted on your mind. It's very easy to have a cheat sheet. It's very easy to have books laying around, or even, looking through your little pamphlet real quick to see what the interpretation is, which is fine. But I want you to try to connect with each card through its symbolism and through its art of imagery. That's what it's based upon. So that's very important, okay? So go through each major arcana card. You will find a favorite. You will find a favorite major arcana card. For tarot readers who are experienced that are watching this, you know what I mean. You will find a favorite major arcana card that evokes a feeling. You will start to evoke a feeling about a card. You will start to evoke or identify it with its meaning as well. So, for instance, for me, I really associate with the second card in the major arcana group, which is the High Priestess. Number 2, the High Priestess, is all about using your intuition. Okay, it's all about trusting your gut instincts, relying on yourself to interpret situations, using your guidance, your inner guidance, as a guide. So the High Priestess is a very beautiful card that I feel very closely linked to, that I feel that I can very much identify with this card. So for instance, look at the symbolism of your High Priestess card. Many High Priestess cards represent a woman. Many of the cards in the tarot deck from the Magician represent a man. That's also very important too. And the traditional values or imagery used even in modern tarot decks of placement of male and female energies. The High Priestess is very much represented by females. Females in terms of archetypes associated with female godlike energies, the goddess, something along those lines. And the High Priestess is very much a generator of using psychic abilities or using your intuition to help you make decisions, or to trust that to help guide you. Her backdrop is the night sky with a full moon, which is very closely bringing up imageries of goddess-like energies under the full moon, the mysteries of that. She's holding a book in her hands, which could be her book of shadows. This could also be a book of secrets or interpretations that only she knows the meanings to, or has the secrets for. This is also a card where she's holding a crystal ball in her hand. Look at the imagery of the card. Look at the imagery of the card. It's very important to not only see the imagery in the backdrop, but also to remember she's associated with the number 2 in the major arcana group, and she's a female. The Magician was represented by a male. Now the Fool, I think the Fool could either be male or female. And it's a youthful energy as well with the Fool. And one of the most endearing cards that you will find in the deck, which is very linked to female womanhood, motherhood, is your number 3 card, which is the Empress. So take out number 3, which is the Empress. And she's very much linked to motherhood. She's a card closely associated with marriage. She's a card that's very much associated with fertility. She's a card that's very associated with maternal instincts. You'll start to see a link between the cards. There's an invisible thread that runs within each major arcana card, like stepping stones. So the Fool is taking a journey. The Magician is realizing he holds the power and making what he wants to have come to fruition in his life through the power of using affirmations or mental imagery or bringing that forth into his life. The High Priestess is relying now on her intuition and trusting that about herself, followed by the Empress, which is all about maternal instincts, once again trusting and using her guidance and feeling secure in that. So the further you go, the more confident the major arcana cards get. Each one is attributed to a symbol, to an image, as well as to a particular sex, whether it's male or female. So going forth through your major arcana cards, look at each one, look at the imagery of each one. Start to notice a pattern. If you do have a book or a pamphlet, read the interpretation along with what you see from your eyes onto each card and its symbolism and its richness that you are getting first from your interpretation. Write it down, and then check the interpretation for yourself. That's very important. Once you get to the end of the major arcana cards, you will have stretched out a journey, a written journey, a journey of symbolism, a journey of imagery that is very much threaded through each of the 22 major arcana cards, which in turn is very much developing a story. There's a story closely associated with each card, and you'll start to see the relevance of that in the story of how they all tie together. So I really want you to focus on the symbolism, the imagery, what your interpretation is first before consulting the book. I want you to connect with the major arcana cards this week. I want you to take notes of what you're interpreting, of what you're seeing. I want you to form a relationship with them. Next week, we will get into further of each of the interpretations of all the major arcana cards, and then we will also start to develop and go into the minor arcana cards. But I want you to develop a relationship with them first this week. Okay, it's very, very important. Now, your homework assignment for this week is to draw a card each morning. From the major arcana cards, draw a card each morning. Clear your mind. You don't have to think of anything at all. If you want to ask a question, maybe ask, what is the message for today? Or what do I need to learn today? Or even what's to come about for my day? First thing in the morning, when you wake up, take that card out of the deck once you shuffle them. How do I shuffle them? If you're not sure how to shuffle them, I would not shuffle them like a traditional playing card deck. I would hold them in your hand, shuffle them like this. I wouldn't do the split and the fancy, I wouldn't do that, because then you're going to have reverse cards. I would shuffle them hand over hand, close your eyes, and just let your mind go blank or clear your mind out. Focus for a few minutes. And then, if you want, you can fan them out. If you want, you can cut them in 3 decks, which I do. However you want to pull the card out, whatever you feel drawn to do the most, pull a card out, look at it, write it down. What is it speaking to you? What do you see without checking a reference or checking your little card pamphlet or a book? What do you see from that card? Go throughout your day. When you are rested that evening, look at your card and see if the card has any significance for you for that day. You will have connected with that card. And it's very exciting because if you haven't done this before, you're going to start to develop a relationship with the card. I'm going to do this with you as well. Okay, I haven't done that in a long time. I'm going to pull a card each day from the 22 major arcana cards, and I'm going to do that with you as well. If you have any questions about your interpretation of the card, or if you'd like to share with me the card that you pick, please email me at nightbirdtarot@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from what everybody's picking. If you want to pick a card each day, you're more than welcome to. If you just want to pick a card for every couple of days, however you want to do it, but I would really highly recommend that you try to pick a card for each morning for the next 7 days, or until we meet again, which will be the following Monday. This video goes out on a Wednesday. The next one will come out on a Monday. Pick a card each day, focus with it, pick up your interpretation of what you see first, write it down. You can carry the card with you all day long if you want to carry it on your person or put it in your bag or your purse or in your wallet, however you want to do it. You can leave it at home, leave it under your pillow, wrap it up, whatever you want to do with that card. Just don't forget what the card is. Don't think about it during the day. Let it go. That night, come back and connect with it and see if it had any significance or had any meaning or had a message for you for that day. This is how you're going to start to connect with the tarot, and this is a good way of how you're going to really learn to interpret the card itself without reading the book. I want you to develop a relationship with your card. So have a great week. We will be back next week for lesson 2. And you're developing your intuition with the tarot. So we'll be back with lesson 2, learning the tarot, a beginner's journey. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week, and I'll see you back next week.